Hi, great. In this video, I'll present the argument. It's called the symmetry argument between the definition of death and abortion. It's in our text. I'm going to present it in a very structured argument form with the main steps as I see it and make some comments on those steps. Remember, this is the third attempt to try to explain or draw the line between partial and full moral standing. Why would we say something has full moral standing and not partial? So we looked at a couple of options that we considered failed, using persons, using human beings. So this is an interesting argument that's offered here that it's at least intriguing. So let's get a move on and we'll have a look at it. Okay, so this is the full argument. So death is the end of one's full moral standing. Definitions of death identify factors that signal the end of moral standing. And if you could take each one of these factors and look for where it happens in the beginning of life, in fetal development, then you could make a case that that fetally developing thing has full moral standing, that fetus. Okay, so I'll break each of these down and make a few comments, and hopefully you're thinking about this, wondering if this could possibly work as an argument. So the first premise is, again, death is the end of one's full moral standing. It's not simply the end of your life, but it's the end of your moral standing. Some points are made in the chapter about the fact that we no longer have the same moral obligations to a corpse. We have some, so it's at least partial, but it's not full moral standing. We don't continue to treat them. This is an important point, I think, as I put there. So the discussion about the definition of death is really a moral debate. That this whole process of defining death is a moral analysis. It's not simply a descriptive or empirical analysis that you might think. So unlike looking at for persons or looking for human beings, which we are defined as just factual or descriptive analysis, we just go out and find them. People don't use those terms necessarily to have any moral meaning. People who are talking about definitions of death do have a moral point or a moral purpose in mind. So that's why I think our text brings that up. That's an important feature, that we're not foisting a moral analysis on something that people generally wouldn't have thought was a moral analysis. Let's move on to the second premise. Definitions of death identify anatomical and physiological factors that signal the end of full moral standing. Okay, so it's important to realize here, definitions of death it's not the best word. We're not defining death. We know what death is. Actually, we're articulating anatomical and physiological realities that can be measured or tested. So what we're defining is what sorts of situations in the body need to be present for us to say this person has died. Okay, so that's the only thing we're defining. So keep that in mind. Yeah, I think there was something else I was going to say. I lost it. So let's just keep moving. No, I think what I was going to say is, it's not that these things, and we'll get into the specific things, are what give something full moral status. So actually, this argument is actually avoiding that. Okay, we're not saying the fact that your heart is stopped, that's the loss of full moral standing. What we're saying is that your heart irreversibly stopping, for example, spells the fact that your full moral standing is gone. So we're not getting into that difficult issue of why would some physical feature give you moral value. Okay, so that's kind of interesting how this argument avoids that. That, I think, is one of the pluses it has for it. The third premise is each definition of death has a corresponding notion of when full moral standing stops and therefore when it must be present. So this is the move. If this situation means you lack full moral standing, then maybe gaining it would be a sign that you now do have full moral standing. Okay, so let me get myself out of here so you can sort of see. This seems to me the biggest thing to think about. Can you move from the end of life to the beginning of life? Okay, is that a fair, plausible move? Something for you to think about. And then finally, each definition of death has a corresponding, at the very least, therefore, late-term fetuses have full moral standing. And that is coming clear once you apply the anatomical and physiological criteria to the beginning of life. And I have a chart here, and I'll post this. It's available too on the lesson underneath this video, that takes each one of the definitions of death and moves from, okay, so this is the definition. What is the criteria that it's offering for death, and what is the anatomical or physiological feature that it's implying has what it takes to end full moral status? Again, it's not claiming that that gives you full moral status, but losing this ends it. And then we look at fetal development, and we see when that thing comes into being. And notice it's squishy, it's iffy. Fetal development is development. It's hard to tell when exactly some of these things come into being. We know there are places where, yeah, there's a brain here now. It was developing. So at the very least, it would rule out late-term abortions as being morally wrong. And that's really all I think it's trying to argue. So there's a couple positions in there for you to look at. So give this some thought. This is at least an interesting argument and an interesting way to go about the problem that simply doesn't simply try to just sort of solve the thing by definition. Okay, let's stop here. So we're at about 7 minutes in, and then we'll bring up one of the objections to this argument in the next video.